All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dominique Pride. I'm research faculty at the Alaska Center for Energy and Power. Unfortunately, my colleague Jesse Keksmarski, who was the first author on the policy brief for this, can't be with us today because he does not have power and therefore he does not have internet. So we were going to tag team this, but I'm going to fly solo. He did most of the GIS stuff on this. So if you have questions for that and I can't answer it, I will refer you to him. But a little bit of background, the mayor's office.
If you don't mind, Doc, before we get started in earnest, just a couple of notes for record. So yeah, today is Tuesday, October 22nd. We're here for our latest Energy for All Alaska Task Force. It's myself here, Joe Stewart, here at FEDC office, along with intrepid Roger Burgraff. And our guest today is Dr. Dominique Pride. They have ACEP, the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, has done the spatial energy burden analysis across the FNSB. And so that is the subject of our discussion. As a reminder to everyone, again, these presentations are for your benefit. So as we move through the presentation, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, I am monitoring the chat. I also can see the participant list. So if you raise your hand, but as always, it's a conversational format. Doc Pride knows what she's gotten herself into. So if you have any questions or comments, you can always just go ahead and take yourself off mute and fire away. But again, this is not the Joe Stewart show. It's here for everyone's benefits. Everyone's encouraged to participate. All right, with no further ado, thanks, Doc.
Okay, so a little bit of background on this. The mayor's office had asked us to look into energy cost burden in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. I think not this past January, but the January before that. And so then a contract was made, and Aaron Trosham, myself, and Jesse Kazmarski all worked on this. And the final product came out this past summer. And there's a policy brief, and then I think a press release as well. And so what we were interested in is looking at how households in the borough, how much they're spending on energy, and how that varies across the borough. And so you might ask, what is energy burden? Energy burden is a way of measuring how much households are spending on domestic energy consumption. So for this analysis, we looked at electricity costs and space heating costs. And energy burden looks at how much of household income is dedicated to energy. And so it's divided by your household income. So low income households that are spending a lot on energy will obviously have a much higher energy cost burden than high income households that are spending less on energy. And this is a useful metric because it allows comparisons across geography. It's not just within the borough, but across the nation, or even across internationally as well. So what influence energy burden? It's really three major factors. So the energy prices, right? And we don't control energy prices. The price of oil is determined on a global market. And a lot of households in the Fairbanks North Star Borough are using heating fuel oil as their primary heating fuel. And that also factors into the price of electricity, because GVEA buys as much interruptible natural gas-fired power from South Central as possible. And they also get 17% of the Bradley Lake Hydro project. But a lot of our local electricity generation capacity is naphtha or diesel fired, and that's very expensive. We do have some coal, but the most expensive generation is the oil fired power. So as anybody that lives in the borough knows, we have really high electricity prices, and heating fuel oil, depending on the global market, is high. It's been routinely high over the last, I'd say, decade or so. So energy prices are obviously a big factor in energy cost burden. Also, the energy efficiency of the housing stock, and then household behavior. A lot of the housing stock in the Fairbanks North Star Borough was built during the pipeline days. And so a lot of housing was built really quickly, and it wasn't necessarily built for our climate. It may be more appropriate to warmer climates. And so we have an aging housing stock that isn't necessarily very energy efficient. We have a very cold climate. So as the delta between the desired indoor temperature and the outdoor temperature increases, so as the colder it gets, but you want your house to stay at, let's say, 70 degrees, as the delta between the indoor and outdoor temperature increases, it requires more energy to heat your home, right? So if you have an identical identical home, one located in Georgia and one located in Fairbanks, it will cost a lot more, or you'll use a lot more energy to heat the one in Fairbanks simply because we have a much colder climate. And then also household behavior is influential in this too, right? So an example I like to use is, let's say you have a 23-year-old bachelor and he has no problem leaving his house at 65 degrees because he's trying to save money, right? So same house, same person, fast forward a couple years. Now this bachelor is no longer a bachelor and he has a newborn baby. So he's probably wants to keep his house a little bit warmer now that he has an infant in the house, and he's willing to pay more to keep his home warm so his child is warm and safe. So household behavior also plays a big role in your electricity use and your heating use.
Or say teenagers who like to keep the house at a tropical level.
Or that play lots of video games, right? Using a lot of electricity on their computers. So another way to think about this is think about your electricity bill before the pandemic and then your electricity bill during the pandemic, right? Since we were all staying at home, we used a lot more electricity, so your electricity goes up. And that's because of behavioral changes, right? You were occupying your house more, so you were using more energy at home. And then the third factor that influences the energy use burden is your household income, right? How much money you have available. When you're looking at your energy costs, the percentage of your income dedicated to that is directly linked to that, right? So if you have a very high income, then you're probably, even if you have a larger home, you're probably spending a smaller portion of your income on energy costs than if you have a very low income. So these are the three most important factors affecting energy cost burden. Jesse actually whipped this up and showed it to me yesterday. So this shows between the third quarter of 2017 and the third quarter of last year, how real energy prices changed within the Fairbanks North Shore Borough. And real prices just means that it's adjusted for inflation. And so if you look at electricity, the price of electricity actually decreased a bit, but and the price of natural gas decreased by roughly 10%, but the prices of all other fuels actually increased. And the biggest increase was in heating fuel oil and then also in birch wood. So this just goes to show, and actually I'll get at this a little bit more later, but I wanted to show you how energy prices have changed over time. Okay, so you might wonder, well, why do we care about energy burden? There are actually policy uses for this metric. It can help determine eligibility criteria for assistance programs. It can help guide energy efficiency or weatherization programs. It can play a role in equity and justice initiatives, and it also can really help with informing policy goals.
Doc, we do have a hand up. Mr. Kraft, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Joe. Dominique, I'm just curious about the electricity rate. You say it's gone down, and I'm not necessarily seeing that on my bill, and I certainly didn't see that at the last couple of meetings at Golden Valley, the rates on rate and on the avoided fuel cost. So I'm just curious.
So this is based on two specific
points in time. So does it stop in 2023? Is that what we're looking at? So we're not even looking at.
So well, the reason that we're looking at.
So that would be on this chart, would it?
So these are two specific points in time. It's the third quarter of 2017 and the third quarter of 2023. And the reason we looked at these is because the third quarter of 2017 was the last time the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation looked into energy cost burden. And the 2023, the third quarter of 2023 is the prices that we use for our energy cost burden. And the reason we use these is they're published in the Fairbanks North Star Borough Community Research Quarterly Series. And so you do make a fair point. Energy prices are constantly shifting, right? And so that means that energy cost burden is constantly shifting. But we picked these two, the third quarter of 2017 and the third quarter of 2023, because these are when reports came out on this. Does that make sense?
Well, and also
I mean, it makes sense.
Sorry, I was going to say also to the point, you said these are inflation adjusted.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So that just means that it's the real price. So if you look at 2017 versus 2024 and you adjust for inflation, then the price of electricity actually has gone down between those 2 points in time.
During that period.
Comparing
That
the
would
third
not be
quarter of
necessarily a
2017
fair-
to the third quarter of 2023. Now, that doesn't
Okay,
mean
so
that,
it's old information. That makes sense. It's old
but
information.
that doesn't mean that the
That
nominal
makes sense.
price, I think you might be thinking of nominal prices. So this is adjusted for inflation.
Yeah, during those dates, a year ago
Again,
is the
Mike,
last date that you
the
looked.
price
Okay,
can be
well, that makes
high.
sense because within the last year, it's definitely gone up. So that makes sense. What your numbers are saying makes sense relative to the dates that you're using. That clarifies it for me. Thank you.
Okay, so the method that we used to get at this, it's a threefold thing, actually. First, we had to estimate the energy use for the residential structures, and then we had to estimate electricity and space heating costs. And so we used data from the Fairbanks North Star Borough Geographical Information System tax and property database. And from that, we pulled building size, age, and physical location. And then we used Alaska Housing Finance Corporation's reports, and we created used linear regression to create a relationship between the building age, size, and energy intensity. And then we also used information from the AHFC report to look at the ratio between electricity and space heating, because we didn't have precise information on that. So we just used what was already available from the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. And so using this, we were able to estimate energy use for each structure, residential structure within the borough. And then once we did that, we estimated the electricity and space heating costs for those structures. So we collected price estimates, and most of those were from that Q3. What is the precise name of it? The Fairbanks North Star Borough Community Research Quarterly Series, the prices that are in that. And then we created a weighted average for space heating. And so we used the Hayes Research, the most recent survey on home heating appliances for the borough. And so we said, okay, if X percentage of the borough is using heating fuel oil, if X percentage of the borough is using natural gas, if X percentage is using wood, we created a weighted average cost, so dollars per MMBTU for space heating. And then using those prices, we estimated the costs for the residential energy structures in point one. So then we needed to estimate the energy burden, right? So first we summed the expenditures across the census tract level. So for both electricity and heating costs for all of the residential structures in the census tract. And then we divided that large number by the average household energy expenditures in that tract, which we estimated previously. And then we have the average household energy expenditures for a tract, and then we divide it by the average, or by the household income, the median household income from that tract. And we got that from the census. So we have that number for each census tract within the borough, and that yields the average energy burden for a given tract. And so how does the Fairbanks North Star Borough compare? So once we had all of the energy burdens for each census tract, then we wanted to figure out, well, what's the average one in the borough? So we did a weighted average based on how many housing units were in each census tract across the borough. And we came up with a weighted average percent of household income spent on energy of 10.12%. And so that's actually 3 times the national average. And then for the Pacific region, because the Pacific Northwest has access to really low cost hydro electricity for both, just their general appliances. And then a lot of places in the Pacific Northwest are heating with electricity. They actually have a lower energy cost burden. The average energy cost burden in the Pacific Northwest is 2.3%. So ours is 3 times higher than the national average, and it's actually 1.7 times greater than what is classified as a high energy burden for by the Energy Information Administration. And the American Council on an energy efficient economy classifies anything greater than 10% as severely energy burdened. So on average, the borough is severely energy burdened. But I do caution that there was significant variation across the borough. And some of that is an artifact of how we estimated these, right? So given the average size and age of homes, and then the median household income within one of the census tracts, that can really drive big changes or big variation in the estimates for energy cost burden. And so downtown actually has the highest, and I believe that was like 16% or around 16%. But we believe that is because a lot of the households in downtown are pretty old. And we had no way of knowing whether these individual households had undergone energy efficiency retrofits. So we assumed that for a given year, a household uses X percent or X BTU, right? That was the nature of the regression equation that we came up with using the ARIS database. And then also, because downtown doesn't necessarily have a ton of housing units, and there aren't a lot of people living down there, that can also affect your median household income. So if you have a much lower income or average income, median income in a census tract, it can make your energy cost burden be much higher. And so the energy burden ranges from a low of 6.7, and that was on Eielson Air Force Base, to 16.3%, and that was the downtown census tract. The annual weighted average expenditures per household for space heating come in at just under $5,000. And then for electricity was about $3,300.
You mentioned that you couldn't, or you didn't know how many of the houses might have received energy efficiency upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, AHFC runs both the weatherization program.
Yes, that is true, but that data has to be de-identified. We don't, we're not allowed to have actual, like, we can't pin that to each individual property, if that makes sense, for privacy concerns.
And they also had the retrofit, home energy retrofit program. I see. Okay. Okay.
Yes, if we and we knew that, like, if we actually had, if we were able to tie the house, it was all de-identified data, then we could have done that. However, the way that this was estimated, we had both pre and post retrofit for houses, and so it probably comes in the middle, if that makes sense. So what we had was just a bunch of data on energy consumption estimates from the ARIS database, right? But we didn't know where specifically the houses were, but we used that information to come up with a regression equation, and that is how we tied the MMBTU consumption to properties.
Okay. Thank you.
So as I noted previously, this study definitely has limitations. There's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to estimate energy cost burden. This was just one way that we decided that we could do this fairly quickly because we had access to this data. So we did not have data on the energy efficiency of all the properties in the borough, right? And even if we would have had access to the non-de-identified, if we had identified data for the borough, for the ARIS database, there are still many houses that didn't go through either the weatherization program or the retrofit program. And people can make energy efficiency upgrades independent of those, right? So we don't necessarily know the energy efficiency of any given structure. Also, we didn't have information on rooftop solar, which will affect electricity prices, because if you're self-generating, then you're going to be purchasing less electricity from the utility. We didn't have data on the heated or non-heated status of garages or additions to properties. And so we just assumed that they were all heated, right? And then we also didn't have information on the year in which some of those additions were constructed. If they didn't have a year associated with it, we just assumed that it was the latest year in the property tax database for the other structures on the property. And then annual average space heating prices, as I said, those change all the time, right? And so if you have a big bump in 1 month, it could fall the next month, and then suddenly your energy cost estimates or energy burden estimates are out of date. There were also some data year mismatches.
Oh, Ms. Pride, you've locked up.
Which can result in slight variations in estimates. And the reason that I'm sorry, what?
Oh, I'm sorry. You keep locking up a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes. May I ask, and not because we don't want to see your smiling face, but go ahead and shut off your video because it goes ahead and allows a little extra bandwidth.
We also had some data year mismatches. And the reason for that is that we used the best available data and the most recent available data. So our census data was from the 2020 census. We used the most recent data from the Fairbanks North Star Borough quarterly report for the prices. And we used the most recent Fairbanks North Star Borough GIS property tax data. So we wanted to use the most recent data available, and therefore there is some mismatches in the years of the data that we used.
Okay. Miss Casino has turned on her video. Lisa, do you have a question or comment?
No, I've had my video on the whole time, Jomo.
Oh, okay. You just rotated up. Okay. Then just a reminder, again, if anybody has questions or comments, they may fire away. Okay, thanks, Doc.
Okay, so the key takeaways, energy burden in the Fairbanks North Star Borough is definitely high relative to the national average. We are considered severely energy burdened. Energy price fluctuations clearly have a huge impact on energy burden and can small variation without this metric, right? So sudden energy cost burden, or the price of heating fuel oil goes up a little bit, and now we're severely energy cost burden. Assistance policies should consider the factors that influence energy cost burden. One of the main driving reasons that the borough was interested in this was for the cost of living adjustment for our soldiers. So our military families are spending an awful lot on energy, and we want to make sure that that's taken into consideration for their cost of living adjustments. And we did notice that the energy burden is highest in areas surrounding the military bases, and that these energy burdens may be disproportionately high for our service members. So if you want to see the policy brief, there is the link. And then we have a direct link. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact either myself or my colleague, Jesse Kazmarski. And I'm willing to take questions now if anybody has any questions.
All right, well, I would open up the floor. Dominique, can we go back to the slide that had the map?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, again, I would open up the floor to questions. I think we all intuitively understand that we're burdened as an economy and as individual residents when it comes to energy cost, kind of regardless of income. I mean, even if it's not, burden's a good word, even if it's not as burdensome because you have a high income, it's still dollars that you might have spent on other things, savings, investing, possibly helping or starting a business, helping someone else start a business. Again, it's dollars no longer in your pocket. I see Mr. Casper. Doc, please.
Thanks, Jomo. Thanks, Dominique. So to Mike's question about kind of the timeliness and the fluctuations in total energy burden. And how, using the methodology you have here, how often could this be updated? Is this something we could put on a website and like track?
Good question, Jeremy. Actually, we're looking for money to make a tool where we can just put this online and you can adjust prices and it'll automatically adjust. So
Okay.
yes.
That was not a plant of a question. That was just something that popped into my head. Thanks, Dominique.
Actually, Doc, it was in my head too.
Great.
Updating and posting. Miss Casino, I see your hand is up this time.
Hi, Jomo. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that, while coal is not a home energy expense for folks, that are heating their home with coal directly, indirectly, I mean, residents in the borough would pay another $245 million without the power plants on Fort Wainwright, downtown, Eielson, UAF. And so I just like to remind folks that coal does play a significant and huge part of keeping energy rates affordable and reliable. So while the conversation continues to want to transition away from firm baseload power, it's really important to realize that we are already paying some of the highest energy costs in the nation, and so without coal in the energy profile mix, that would significantly go up for businesses, clinics, households, et cetera.
Well, Lisa, and to that point, again, you're kind of leaning toward electricity in that comment, but those distributed heating systems often provide heat and power. So the university, we already see here that second highest tier is Fort Wainwright, and they're not only getting electric spun, but they're getting distributed heat as well as downtown. So yes, it would be a double impact on those users.
Without coal, Jomo, it's about 200. We're redoing our study right now, but without coal in the energy profile mix, residents would anticipate, and businesses, a $245 million increase to what they're already currently paying for home and for heating and electricity.
Well, our estimate in the earlier 2000s, about 2010, I suppose, of how much extra money was flowing out of our economy when the price of oil went from its historic average of about $1.50 a gallon up to, say, $4 a gallon, it was sucking an additional $600 million per annum out of our economy. Mike Kraft. Hey, Mike, your hand's up and your mic's apparently on.
Hey,
But I'm not hearing you.
Hey, I got curious, so I went back and looked at my bills from third quarter 2017 till now. Testing, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Jomo?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Hello, we hear
Can
you.
hear me now?
You're coming in and out, Mike.
Okay.
Might you try posting in the
Okay,
chat?
I looked back at my bills just out of curiosity. Yeah. I'm
Oh, no,
trying to talk. Can you? Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay.
How about now? Can you hear me now, Jomo?
Yes, sir.
No? Okay. Third quarter 2017, our avoided fuel cost was 9.6 cents a kilowatt hour. The ratchet demand was $14 an hour, or $14 a kilowatt. Now we're at 13.6 cents a kilowatt hour avoided fuel cost, and our ratchet demand is $24. So that's almost just in the ratchet demand, about a 50% increase from 2017. And then the other interesting thing that I noticed isn't in this is the fact that we can no longer buy economy power from Anchorage because they don't have it available for us. So that has shifted another 70 plus megawatts of production from Anchorage to Fairbanks. So I would imagine that this document really needs to be updated more often to be accurate, because it really isn't depicting the current state of how much burden we are actually carrying, and I just wanted to share that information. I tried to send you an email with those snapshots from those two different bills, but I'm having trouble. The internet isn't working at my house. I'm on my hotspot. Thank you.
All right.
I understand that but this was just based on residential energy prices or the residential rate. So residences aren't paying the demand charge like a commercial or industrial would. And also it was adjusted for inflation. And so I agree that, yes, it's great to update this as much as possible, but whatever the price was in the third quarter of 2017 versus now, if you adjust for inflation for the residential rate and not including the customer charge, it is slightly lower now.
Well, and so the more fundamental point, again, I mean, I think what we're talking about is not whether or not it's bad, but how bad. I mean, what Mike is describing is, again, we just had an even higher pricing, as we move through the winter and into this year, which again would just add to this. It's just more burdensome. It's not like it got less burdensome from what he's describing. I do see we have a question in the chat from, let's say, how does seasonal pricing volatility impact the accuracy of these energy burden estimates? Well, as you're noting, it's, again, a snapshot as opposed to.
Well, they would definitely impact it depending on how big the swing is, right? So if it was a small swing in prices, then it would not be, it wouldn't impact it as much. But if you had a large change in prices, it would definitely impact the energy burden estimate. And that is one of the big takeaways of our report, is that this is a snapshot in time, right? And so you can only look at this at any given point in time, but you can update it as much as you want. But for what we did, it's the third quarter of 2023.
No, it's great. It's great. No criticism, at least not from this table. I guess one of my bigger questions are regarding granularity. Again, when we started looking at this many years ago, say in the 2005, 6, 7 timeframe, one of the things we ascertained was that, one of the reasons the rise in the price of oil was being so acutely felt and so broadly was the fact that so many of our residents were relying on fuel oil for space heating, well above 90%, well above 95%. I wonder if in the course of this, if we got any understanding as to how our energy market may have changed. So that would be the first question regarding, how the percentage of our residential structures that are relying on fuel oil as opposed to another fuel for primary heating source. And then the percentage of structures that might have an alternate heating source. For myself, I mean, I have a couple of pellet stoves. A number of people have wood stoves. And so that is a slight defrayer against, say, the price of oil. Were we able to get at any of that, or could we?
Yes. So the way that we estimate or did the average price per BTU, right, or million BTU, was we used the most recent survey, heating fuel appliance survey from the DEC, the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. And actually, I think that they just ran a more recent survey this past year. So once the results of that are out, that this could be recalculated to look at the percentage of homes that are using different heating appliances and then the fuels that those heating appliances use. So we took a weighted average of the fuels that were being used by the various heating appliances within the borough. And so that takes into account both households that are their primary, secondary, and tertiary heating appliances.
All right, I would open up the floor. Rick, if you don't have a question, I'd be shocked. Okay.
Well, I signed on late, Mr. Chairman, and I really want to take a look at this study because it's fascinating. And so I'm going to do that. And I think that we may get this presentation actually at the chamber here coming up. So I'll have more questions then. But thank you for noticing me.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, I'm on the website. See if I can actually find, there it is. I'm gonna go ahead and post I think I'm getting to it. I see a brief PDF. I tell you what, I'm gonna go ahead and post the link, everybody. Raj,
Yeah,
any questions or comments from you, sir?
no, not really. You said you're to say,
Let's see. Ooh, we just had a question come in on the chat.
um,
You indicated there was a spectrum of burden. Example, military bases at 6%, downtown at 16. Can you say more about how this info would be utilized in determining, say, military allowance assistance? Would it be detailed to specific locations, the overall FNSB average, some other calculation?
That is a good question. I actually do not know the specifics of how the cost of living adjustment is calculated, but I do know that utility costs are included in that. And that was the impetus for the study. We wanted to make sure that we knew what the average utility costs were across the borough for households, and then just to provide that information to the powers that be, and they can use it to calculate their cost of living adjustments. But if they don't have that information, it can't be used, right? So
I will tell you, looking at this map here, again, I am surprised at Fort Wainwright specifically, again, with their distributed heating and power system, their chip. Why is that burden so high? I mean, is it based on, yeah, I guess that surprises me.
So this probably because it's using the average price across the whole borough, and is the housing on the Fort Wainwright pretty old? That would explain it, or is it new? I'd have to go look. I'd have to go look at the specific data for Fort Wainwright to answer your question.
Well,
An
we don't know
efficiency issue. Yep.
Oh, please. Somebody was piping up. Well, we also know the nature of the contract with the concessionaire who provides that heat and power. Again, it may not necessarily be coming out of the service member's pocket. It might be just a factor of what the base itself is paying. And I am interested in my neighborhood. Yeah, I know I feel burdened. Mrs. Slava.
Hey, thanks, Jomo. So I did want to say the housing on both installations is significantly older, and as you mentioned, the power is going to be calculated based on what they know, like what the chip is using on each of those installations. As residents who live on installation aren't paying specifically, it is going to be part of their BAH costs that the housing contractor receives. They are in charge of that, and housing residents on base do receive a mock-up energy bill, but that's a whole nother mess of a thing to get into when you're talking energy and how that's paid for through the military. But I was going to say, with the houses on base and the COLA and all of that, so COLA is not for energy. It can be used to the cost of living allowance that military receives. BAH is supposed to be a part of covering those bills. And so it's great to have this so that our legislators and such here in the state, but even across the country, can see how much energy costs and what that can do for our service members and their families living up here, whether that be on base or off base, for those homes to be updated to be more energy efficient and so forth.
Amen. All right, well, we are entering the third quarter of the hour. Again, I have posted the link to the report itself. Mike Kraft, I see you've taken yourself off of mute again.
I was just going to say, I got bumped off there for a second, but as far as Fort Wainwright goes, a lot of what's happening on at Fort Wainwright is relative to the efficiency of that power plant and the distribution system. From the EIS information that we went through a couple of years ago, that was pretty dismal with the distribution of heat in that underground system that they have out there, and then also the efficiency of the power plant that's 60 plus years old. So I think that drives up their cost. I think about 60 cents of every dollar out there was being lost to efficiency at the time that EIS was being reviewed.
And I feel like I need to caution everybody that we didn't look at the variations in energy costs for specific locations. It was the average for the entire borough, right? So we used GIS to try to figure out the square footage of residential properties in the borough. And then we figured out, we used the ARIS database to come up with the relationship between the age and size of homes and their energy use intensity. And then we multiplied that number by the average price per MMBTU of heating fuels, which was based on the percentage of appliances. It's weighted by the percentage of appliances using specific types of fuels within the borough. And then we added in the price of electricity, so GVA's electricity, and then divided that by the average income in each census tract. So that was the methodology. We didn't go look at specific variation in for energy for each tract. And so you're right that the military bases will be a little bit different because they're not, well, actually Fort Wainwright does buy a lot of electricity from GVEA, but they are using their power plant for steam generation. So, and I don't know if the families get billed for that. It sounds like maybe they don't. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, and just regarding the EIS on Fort Wainwright, there were notable concerns about that whole EIS process for the combined heat and power plant. And there are many challenges that are being raised to that EIS. So I would just caution folks.
Well,
around
and some controversy as to why it was initiated to begin with.
Yeah.
We won't get into that inside baseball. I will say, so I was interested to hear, and I'm actually very pleased to hear that the funder of this study was in fact the FNSB, our own local municipality that had an interest in having this understanding and this data. I see that Mayor Matherly is on the line, and that's good. I wish we had a couple more legislators or candidates, because this is just the kind of thing I think we should look at maybe getting some more funding to, so we could have that both greater level of detail, but also keep this thing moving forward so we can have longitudinal information.
Well, and Jomo, I think you bring up a good point that this was funded by the borough, yet you know, and to have a report come back that says that we are significantly an energy burdened community, but then to draft a climate action adaptation plan, which would then ultimately drive up the cost of energy for our community through taxpayers, realizing what I've been told is that that climate action adaptation plan is for borough policy, you know, on borough buildings and transportation vehicles, et cetera. But we, as ultimately taxpayers, pick up the cost of the policies that the borough implements. So just kind of, it's interesting to me that this report was not part of that conversation at all when the borough was debating their climate action adaptation plan.
Well, this didn't come out till this summer, so I don't think it was available at the time that the climate action plan was being discussed.
The flip side of that is, it's just the kind of thing I would love to have, or I'm very pleased to have in hand. So here at FEDC, we've been big advocates for a very long time regarding things like the weatherization program, the federally backed interior weatherization that helps lower income and seniors. Things like the old AHFC rebate program that helped defray the cost of energy efficiency upgrades for just normal homeowners. And trying to get those things fully funded. Well, keep the federally one funded, but also restart, if we have the opportunity, the state-run program, because they did serve different demographic groups.
And I think regarding
please.
that, I think that Jimmy Ord made an announcement that the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation is going to bring back those programs, or some iteration of those programs again. So that's good news, because the cheapest energy is the energy you don't use, right?
The cheapest BTU is the one you never use. And energy efficiency always pays you back. It's just a matter of time. Mr. Matherly, sir.
Hey, good morning. I came in late too, and I apologize. I was stuck in my driveway, and I was as much of fair. It's amazing to see Roger there. I mean, that guy goes everywhere. I mean, I have no excuse after I see Roger everywhere in the world. Anyway, good presentation. I heard Rick said it's coming up to a chamber meeting. I think today is another debate, but Dominique, when will this be at a chamber presentation?
Tomorrow morning.
Okay. Oh, it's not at a luncheon then. It's at the, okay. It's at a committee meeting. Yeah, I'm going to probably tune into that then because I came in late. And I think you're right, Jomo. Other, community leaders should hear this, and of course, Mayor Hopkins is brand new to this, but he's not new to the discussion, obviously. So it'll be good for him to hear about this, and same with Mayor Pruz and even the new mayor in North Pole. I mean, it's all community wide, and it's an important conversation. So thank you for that. Thanks, Dominique.
Well, and we may have opportunities coming this spring. Again, Anchorage has they're getting ready to feel what we've long felt. And they're going to want to do stuff to abate it. It may create some opportunities for us up here. All right. Well, again, we are at the very top. We're nearing the top of the hour. I see folks are starting to drop off. If there are any further final comments, Ms. Shepherd?
No final comments.
No, okay. You always have
Thank you.
such good questions and insights. Okay. Well, I guess that wraps it up then. Let's see. Hold on, I'm checking my calendar now. See if I have anything lined up for us. Okay, I don't believe that I have anything lined up for us next week. I will let you know if that changes. Otherwise, it would be just a couple of days before Halloween. So everybody, again, we've had our little, it was awful yesterday. The roads are terrible. So everybody just please be safe, take care of yourselves and your families. And we will see you again though soon. I'll send out the notice for whatever is the next Energy for All Alaska Task Force. And Doc Pride, again, great work. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, we'll see about helping you help us as we further characterize our energy economy.